The Marvels is setting all kind of records that the MCU and the Walt Disney Company did not want to set. Number one, right now, The Marvels is looking at the worst drop in MCU history for its second weekend over the first opening weekend, to the tune of nearly 80%, according to estimates on Sunday afternoon. And then, of course, the big one, the amount of financial loss that the Walt Disney Company is going to suffer at the box office on this movie is going to approach $300 million. And we're going to talk about how that is and why right now. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. It's another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show. We're going to be talking about this Marvel situation and, yes, the new Hunger Games film starring Rachel Zegler in more depth. Be here in just a few hours, Sunday, November 19th, for that one at 6 p.m. Eastern. Well, for the last several weeks, we've been seeing the financial trades pile on to the Marvels again and again. This from Paul Tassi over at Forbes magazine. The Marvels bombing should lead to lower budgets and lower expectations. And yes, that seems a foregone conclusion, as we've discussed many times. Even Disney CEO Bob Iger has been hinting for the last several months since his renewal for another 2 years, an extension as CEO through the end of 2026, during an interview with CNBC back in July, that not only would the number of productions be pulled back at the Walt Disney Company, particularly when it came to Marvel, but that the productions that were greenlit would be seeing reduced budgets going along with them. We talked recently about how Blade, the new remake of Blade, was going to be due out in a couple of years, and they're talking about a sub-$100 million budget, which would be by far and away the cheapest Marvel film made yet in the Disney era. And then going back about 2 months, Disney spent over $270 million to make The Marvels. Yes, over $270 million US dollars equivalent to produce this film. A film that is now going to turn in the worst performance in MCU history at the box office. Now, we know this because our friend Caroline Reed over at Forbes magazine did the yeoman's work of digging up the financial returns for the Marvels, just as she has done over the years for many other Marvel titles, as well as those from Lucasfilm like Star Wars or even Indiana Jones. What Disney is stating as their budget is what they intend to spend on a film. But as we have learned over the last several years, Disney's intentions are so far removed from reality, it's almost not even funny. There are a number of places, Deadline magazine included, still quoting some of the original budget numbers that came out from Disney, which were about $200 million. A very common figure we've seen from the Walt Disney Company for MCU titles and bigger budget films like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. But of course, because of the work of places like Forbes, a lot of attention has come into Disney for overspending on these things and not delivering anywhere near the box office that needs to be. And of course, even this channel, Valiant Renegade, has gotten some attention as well for running the numbers down based on some of these reports from Forbes magazine and Caroline Reed compared to what we know the box office yields back to distribution and to studios from the retail box office take.
That's according to a number crunch by prominent YouTuber Valiant Renegade.
And a headline says 1,000 words. The Marvels suffers the worst MCU second weekend drop. This is the Sunday box office update from Anthony D'Alessandro at Deadline magazine. Third place for the weekend belongs to Disney's The Marvels with a second Friday of 2.8 million. Ouch! That is a drop of 87% week over week. Saturday of 4.4 and the second weekend forecast of 10.2 million. A 78% fall from the first weekend, the biggest second weekend drop ever for an MCU title, and a running total of 65 million by Sunday. Now, I hate to rain on the parade, but let me rain on this parade. It's probably going to come in even slightly worse. This movie has consistently underperformed even the already low expectations that the analysts out there have foisted upon it. And we're looking now at a perhaps $10 million or even a sub $10 million second weekend coming off of an already terrible $46 million first weekend, the worst in MCU history, even going all the way back to 2008 with The Incredible Hulk, the first film in the modern MCU era. And that film made $55 million its opening weekend, unadjusted for ticket price inflation. The Marvels underperformed even that. Like we talked about before, if The Incredible Hulk just put the same number of butts in seats today that it did in 2008, with modern day average ticket prices that the Marvels enjoyed, its opening box office weekend would have been much closer to $100 million. So let's see in the aggregate just how bad this is now that we have a full 10 days. A full 10 days of the Marvels brings it to $65 million. And I want to remind folks of a tweet that I made on Friday. I said, let the record show that after one full week, 7 days in the box office, the Marvels failed to break $55 million domestic, and in so doing, also has still failed to surpass the opening weekend of the Hulk 2008 with no inflation adjustment. And there's the numbers right there, $54.8 million, a full $1 million shy of what the Hulk did 15 years ago.
But wait! There's more!
Because look at the headline here from September 20th that we had up earlier from our friend Caroline Reed. Disney spent over $270 million to make the Marvels. But as we continue to remind folks, that comes with a very, very big caveat. And that caveat is that that figure was before, repeat, before the massive amount of reshoots yet again that occurred in 2023. That $275 or so million figure that Caroline Reed drew from the financial returns from the Walt Disney Company itself in the UK was before they delayed the film after the disastrous opening of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania to give the Marvels an additional several months to do massive amounts of reshoots, weeks on end, in addition to a lot of brand new additional post-production, editing, VFX, CGI, throw the whole ball of wax in there. If they had already spent $275 million up to that point and then went back to the drawing board, the final tally for this film, we may not know for another year to year and a half, because that figure, that $275 million figure that Caroline reported, that's only through July of 2022. That means this gross spend figure, this $274 million figure in the article, could easily make it up to about $100 million more, closer to $370 to $380 million potentially. Very easily done with the amount of reshoots that is rumored to have been packed in the last 6 to 8 months for this film. Now, of course, there are some film tax credits, which is why I think the net cost of this film for Disney will come back down to around, or maybe just a little bit under, $300 million. So that brings us to the loss equation. Now look at that international figure for a second. $96 million. The opening weekend for this film internationally was about $62 million. That means after the first 3 days, for the next week, including the entire second weekend, this movie only drew in an additional $34 million, roughly half of what it did in the first 3 days. This movie is dead, and this movie is going to struggle to get past $200 million gross global retail, just as we predicted before it opened weeks in advance. And if this movie finishes out around $200 to $225 million, we have a big problem. With a nearly $300 million net expense by the Walt Disney Company to produce this movie, and easily another $100 million in global marketing, because as we heard, that Disney pulled back on the marketing for this film. Normally, a film like this would have commanded somewhere closer to $140 to $150 million global spend. But just like we heard about Indiana Jones, and just like we heard about Strange World last year with Disney, those dollars were pulled back and then redirected elsewhere. In this case, perhaps more along the lines of promoting Wish, which is releasing in about a week. And the reason for that is because Disney knew coming in a few weeks ahead of time that this was going to be a disaster, and there was no reason to throw any more good money after bad. But still, $100 million in marketing on top of a $300 million production budget puts Disney's all-in costs for this film at around $400 million. That means this movie easily needed to break $800 million at the box office to recover that $400 million in costs, and it's not going to get anywhere close. With a $400 million production budget and marketing expense all in costs here, and a $200 million estimated global return in retail receipts, that means the Walt Disney Company is going to lose somewhere to the tune of about $300 million on this film, which is an absolute catastrophe and, quite frankly, has got to be the biggest financial loss on any movie ever made in Hollywood history. Now, granted, I'm not inflation adjusting for ticket prices and for dollars on production, but I'd be hard-pressed to find, even with those adjustments put into place, a movie that could possibly beat it. We could throw in things maybe like Cutthroat Island, but then again, that was even in a different era. That was in an era when those movies still got licensed out in a post-theatrical environment. And of course, Disney doesn't do this anymore with their core products. They keep everything at home on Disney Plus, where it makes no money. So congratulations to Disney for breaking all the records they didn't want to break. Namely, the biggest second weekend drop-off in MCU history. One of the biggest second weekend drop-offs, I would say, in cinematic history. And almost undoubtedly, the biggest financial loss in cinematic history for a title. But hey, Disney's fine. Everything's good. Nothing's wrong. Keep doing your thing, Wall Street. Or wake up and figure out what we've been knowing for years. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.